can happen. All right, friends, thanks for hopping on today. We have our 1 p.m. team call, and I met Stephanie probably 6 to 8 weeks ago on a reel. I don't remember if I found her or she found me, but we both have March 2020 and March 2018 babies. So I think it was the pandemic babies reel that I did back a couple of months ago. But we immediately clicked and we're like, how can we connect? How can we help each other? Her audience is mamas that are trying to do better things with their lives as well. And everything she shares, her content, I'm like, so relatable. She just hosted a retreat this past weekend. We were talking about how important it is to be surrounded by women that are not only struggling with the same things that you're struggling with, but also trying to get to the same places in life that you're trying to get, right? That positivity, that leveling up, that choosing a better perspective and a different view of life than most do. So I'm so excited to have her today. She's actually going to be talking to us about how your emotions, what no one told you about your emotions and how they're keeping you stuck. So she is a former NASA psychologist, obviously a mom of 2 little girls. I'm going to try and make sure everyone's muted as they're hopping on here. And I am so pumped to give her our undivided attention this afternoon. Have your pen and paper ready. If you're listening at work with an ear pod in, maybe come back to the recording later because I know she's going to give us some tangible tips for a better life. So without further ado, I will spotlight Stephanie, and you are welcome to take the floor.
All right. Thank you for that intro. I'm like, ooh, that's me. All right. I'm so happy to be here, ladies. Thank you, Brittany, for having me. So yeah, today I'm going to talk about what no one told you about emotions and how that's keeping you stuck. And I would love if this is interactive. I don't just want to be talking at you the whole time. So if you want to chime in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask questions, please do that. And just for full transparency, at the very end, I'm going to share a little bit about my program, but I will pause for questions before that, so you can either stay on and listen or not, if it doesn't sound like it would be a good fit for you. So I'd like to ask you a couple questions before I dive into the recommendations and tips. I would love to know, where in your life do you feel like your emotions are getting in the way? Maybe they feel like a nuisance, or you wish you didn't feel something. So we'll start with that one. And then you can either say it in the, I see the chat. Let me open this up. Business 100%, physical appearance in my marriage relationship, I would say. All right. Can you elaborate a little bit more about business? And then physical appearance. Tell me more, Brittany. And then marriage relationship.
Joelle, feel free to unmute yourself if you're able to. Sometimes that's easier than texting it all out. But
okay, yeah, because it's hard for me to like put my thoughts into words right now.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay.
Like 2 different areas, I would say, like definitely just holding myself back from posting or being vulnerable, or like overthinking way too much into like what, like I'll be all about posting something, and then right before I post it, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to say that, you know, just
I'm just kidding.
And then I would also say, when I don't get the response I'm hoping for from customers, I have to like take myself back a second to respond, so that I don't get like, because it's so easy for me knowing how much I love what we do, like how someone could not think it's going to work for them. So sometimes I find myself getting a little bit frustrated with the people saying like, I don't have this, or making excuses. I'm like, what, but you can, you know?
Yes.
So I guess I would say those 2 areas really.
So the second one, when people don't think it's going to work for them, is that before they're a client or even while they're a client?
I guess just to give like a quick example, conversation with someone last night who just joined me less than a month ago, already wanting to cancel her products, you know, and just like, I'm like, well, I actually used what we learned in one of the team calls the other night about like busting through the objections. I'm like, did you give it a solid try, or are you just like giving up? But initially I was like, oh, people are so frustrating sometimes, you know?
Yes. Okay. I want to come back to this. It ties into one of the recommendations and tips that I'm going to give. So if I forget, remind me. Thank you so much for elaborating. And it's helpful for me to understand like more detail. Oh, and I teach classes, so it's captioning me sometimes for like, what the heck? Okay, let me see what else was shared. Okay, sharing my story with others, tearing myself down for not being what I want to be in my career, and toddler tantrums. My God, toddler tantrums, I'm with you. All right, so sharing my story with others is when your emotions get in the way. Do you get in your head and not share or not be as open? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I get like, I'm a perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
So then once I start thinking about how to share vulnerably, I try to correct myself, if that makes sense. And then I realize that I'm not being like necessarily myself. And then I kind of shut down and decide, oh, I'm not going to really share this today.
Okay, that's helpful. I like that. Thank you for being open about that. I appreciate it. She didn't cancel. Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So I have just a couple other questions. Some of this you might have already, it might be part of your answer for number one. So what setbacks are you currently facing that result in you feeling like maybe you're not as resilient as you want to be, and just any general things that you're hoping to walk away with today? Second, the toddler tantrums. Okay. I'm making a couple notes so I can come back to some of this. Sometimes I get on a roll. Okay. Anybody have anything they want to say for question 2 or 3? I'm not sure.
I'll tie in something. I asked our guest speaker on Monday night. How do you stay inspired or resilient? I love the word you used here. When you feel kind of burnt out and like a lot of people around you are also burnt out, and not necessarily like because of their personal life, but because of the heaviness of the last 2 years of the world. So I feel like that's a setback, because so much of what a lot of us do is energy driven. I can't necessarily help someone if I'm not feeling my best myself. And so just kind of getting out of that burnout. I don't know if burnout is the right word, but just kind of feeling not resilient.
Yeah. Okay. I'll touch on this. And if I forget, again, ask. But this directly connects to a couple things that I'm going to share. So I'll try to tie it together. Okay. And then how to not get in my own head. Okay. So I'll call that overthinking. Third, the toddler tantrums. I carry the day's stress into my reactions sometimes. Okay. This is good. Thank you so much for sharing, because I love to tailor this a bit so it's like more helpful for you rather than just like generic advice with me, guessing like, okay, I think this will resonate. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. I want to share just a tiny bit about me so you know who I am. Historically, I was very much a perfectionist, people pleaser, type A. I'm probably still type A if I'm being honest, and recovering perfectionist. And I really tried to control everything, including myself. And what that resulted in was emotional breakdowns and sometimes emotional explosions, in which case afterwards, I felt a lot of shame and embarrassment. And I didn't want to be like that, but I didn't know what to do. And then 9 years ago, I took a workshop called The Human Element, and it completely changed my life. Like, I couldn't look at myself the same way anymore. I couldn't look at the world the same anymore. And what it did for me is basically drastically increase my self-awareness. And now I am a licensed human element practitioner because I made a commitment actually day one of that workshop that I will spread this to as many people as possible, because ultimately, I didn't want anybody to feel the way that I was, which sometimes I actually felt broken and I didn't know what to do. So that's just a real quick version of my story. I'm happy to share more at any time. And I'll just keep going. So, oh yeah. I would like to know, because sometimes I will admit, like, part of me is like, okay, you just said you felt broken. Does that resonate with people, or do you sound nuts? But I still share it in hopes that it does resonate with people. Oh, definitely relay. Okay, we are in good company then. All right, so I use the word resilient. And so I want to be clear when I say that word, what I'm referring to, and it's really our ability to recover from setbacks, adapt well to change, and just keep going in the face of adversity. And adversity is what we have all experienced over the last 2 freaking years. Holy moly, it's been a lot. And so I'm going to talk about some things that get in the way of us feeling resilient today so that you can end up feeling more resilient. All right. So the number one thing that gets in the way from us being resilient ultimately comes down to a lack of self-awareness, self-accountability, and self-acceptance. And this is embedded in all the work that I do, and I will guide you to grow in each of these areas in the Brave Accelerator. But for now, what I want you to focus on today is the tools that I share so that you can start with increasing your self-awareness, because I firmly believe that self-awareness is your superpower. And what you might be thinking is, Steph, I am self-aware, and you probably are. And self-awareness is like a staircase that has no top. So there's always the ability to become more self-aware. If you've ever had a moment where you had a bigger reaction to something that's really not, in hindsight, that big of a deal, there's an opportunity for you to become more self-aware. Maybe you felt confused about, like, okay, why did I get so angry? Why was I triggered? Why did I snap at them? Why, any of those moments, then there's an opportunity to learn more about yourself. So let's dive in to, I like that. I'm aware I'm a mess. You are not a mess. Part of you feels that way, but I bet you are not. Okay, so what no one told you, number one, and I really want you to take this literal. And it is that your emotions are neutral messengers with the purpose of informing you that one of your needs or one of your desires isn't being met. And so a lot of people in my community come thinking that their emotions are a nuisance. Why do I feel like this? Why am I reacting this way? Why am I triggered? And when you switch the way that you look at your emotions to think of them as data, everything will change for you, because it's all data. Now, I want you to picture this inverted U as an emotional cycle, okay? Every emotion has a cycle, and the average time that an emotion lasts is about 60 to 90 seconds. So if you feel like, well, but sometimes I end up feeling emotional the whole day, or for multiple days, or for weeks, and I just feel, for instance, angry or sad or frustrated or this or that, that is an indication you are stopping yourself from going through the emotional cycle. When you don't allow yourself to feel the entire emotion, it stays with you, it persists. Okay. And for most people, I'm not going to say everybody, but for most people over the years, we are taught to stop our emotions and not feel them. And we are taught that that is a good thing. But the problem with that is when we don't allow ourselves to go through that full emotional cycle, there's a whole bunch of negative, am I able to mute? No, okay. There's a whole bunch of negative outcomes that come up, and I'll talk about those shortly. But for the first thing that I want to point out is when we're little, and then if you have kids, be mindful of this too. We are often hushed, shushed, put in our rooms. and in a number of different ways taught, don't experience your big emotions. And a lot of times we as parents and our parents for us had the best of intentions, and they are trying to teach us to regulate, which we all need to be able to do. But what ends up happening for a lot of us is that as we grow into adults, we cut off our emotions sooner. And so when I say cut off our emotions, sometimes this happens through numbing. So for instance, it could be overworking, overeating. It could be using drugs. It could be drinking. It could be shopping. It could be a whole number of things, playing video games. And when we cut it off, that often results in continuous low-grade anxiety. So if you know somebody or you feel this way, kind of like anxious all the time, that may be an indication that you are not allowing yourself to process your emotions. Other things that happen is we get stuck in our heads ruminating, and we have problems in our body. So you probably have had like a headache or a bellyache before tied to your emotions. And there's more research that there's actually a tie between chronic pain and emotional suppression. I'm not going to get into that today, but I just want you to be aware that allowing yourself, and if you have kids, allowing your kids to experience their emotions is of the utmost importance. And where we start with that is becoming aware of what is the emotion telling me. And so that's what I want to share with you next. What no one told you is that each and every single emotion can be used as a clue for what need or desire isn't being met. So I'm going to walk you through a few of them. And there are more, and I'm happy to share more. But so for instance, anxiety is usually tied to you need to deepen your self-understanding because there's something that you're not allowing yourself to be aware of or that you're not aware of. And that we work on that extensively in the Brave Accelerator. Overwhelm. When you feel overwhelmed, that is your internal self begging you to ask for support. But a lot of times when we feel overwhelmed, or at least a lot of my clients, and I have been through this as well, I just push through, power through, right? End up in burnout, like you mentioned, Britt. And I just know so many of us ignore the emotion. That's what it's there for, though. It's data to tell you what to do next. Irritation is an indication that you need time for yourself. Okay. Anger could be an indication that maybe a boundary needs to be put in place, or maybe somebody crossed a boundary. That's the same thing with resentment sometimes. And I love the comments in the chat box. Yeah. That asking for help is one that I struggled with big time. And then I want to talk about guilt because I know that comes up for a lot of people. Sometimes that's an indication that you need to evaluate, are you pressuring yourself to be someone that you're not, or have you behaved contrary to who you want to be? And so my whole point is that use your emotions as data rather than just feeling frustrated that you're feeling a certain way. Let them guide you and be those neutral messengers. Oh, yay, this is so good already. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, let's do one more. So if you're feeling insecure, because I know a few of you mentioned from a business perspective, you were like, okay, I got this content together, or I'm going to be vulnerable and then I get scared. Insecurity, although that to us, typically, I think a lot of people use that as oh, maybe I shouldn't do it. It's actually the opposite. It's an indication to put yourself out there so that you can build confidence. Because if you don't take that first step, the confidence can't come. And so it's making the next right move over and over and over again. I'm so happy that this is hitting home for you. I'm going to pause here because I went over 2 tips already and I have 5. So I'll just pause real quick. Any questions coming up that I might be able to answer for you?
I think sometimes naming our emotion is hard, but the fact that you gave us a task to do when we feel that emotion is it's so good because especially if you're a type A person, you want the list of things to do to feel better. So I'm just loving this.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy it resonates. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So the third thing that probably nobody ever told you is that we are never, ever responding to the world. We are always responding to our interpretation of the world. And the cool thing about this is you choose your interpretation. So this is a tie I want to make with Britt, you said like the heaviness and how to stay resilient and not experience burnout. It's really tapping into what interpretation am I making up with this? Because if it's a heavy interpretation and you're not really aware of it, then it's going to bring you down. And this is just an opportunity to change your mindset. So I'm going to show this in a different way that most people have found extremely helpful in my course. So people tend to think that this happens. I see or hear something or think something, and then I have an emotional reaction to what I saw, heard, or thought. That is not true. There is a step in between. I see or hear something or think something or feel something. I make up a story and I emotionally react to the story every single time. Okay. Every time. And so this has a lot to do with self-talk, which I'm sure you all are well aware. And psychologists and neuroscientists have found that the inner monologue that we have is between 150 and 300 words per minute. So that's about 45,000 to 51,000 thoughts a day. And most of it is harmless. I need to be at my appointment at 12:30, you know, things like that. Or I need to show up at Steph's presentation at 1. But it can and does lead to negative outcomes too. So when there's an absence of information, our brain automatically fills in the gaps with our assumptions and our stories. And we create these stories from our past experiences and our present view. And sometimes the stories are accurate, but more often than not, they are wrong. And I say this like really clearly, and women in my course will be like, no, like I know what they're thinking, or I know why they did that. And I'm like, okay, let's check. And then they come back and they're like, you were right. Like I was wrong. And I'm like, I know, like, I'm sorry, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So, so when unchecked, when we don't check our stories and when we're not aware of our stories, everything feels like a fact. And so what I want you to do is slow down enough to separate what are the facts, actual facts, and what story am I making up or assumption am I making up? And then you can check it. So I want to be really clear about something. The goal is not to stop making up stories. It's just to be aware of it. So if you want to change it or fact check it, you can, because your brain has 5 primary processes, and one of them is literally to make up stories. Okay, so if you try to not make up stories, you're going to be fighting your brain, and that's an uphill battle that you are not going to win. So Caitlin, you said, why do we so quickly make up stories that are negative? So our brain does have a negativity bias. So this is like not a you thing. This is just the way that your brain functions. And so it's working with your brain rather than against your brain. Any other questions coming up here? I struggle with this, with the state of the world, what I envisioned my kids like. Yes.
Does that make sense? Like
it does.
The making up of the story part. Like I just always had these ideas of what I thought my kids like school age years were going to look like and all these things. And it's changing so much for my family. Mm-hmm. And based off of like what could happen.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like you take little bits and pieces of things and then it's like, oh, well, I can't do this with them now because of this, this, and this or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's a big thing right now in my house.
Yeah. that resonates with me so much. And it's almost like you knew what I was going to share for tip number 4, because I'm going to go into this. But first, I'm going to share, like, personally, I relate to this because I had my second baby in March 2020, and I have grieved because of that not being anywhere close to the experience that I thought it was going to be. Like maternity leave, like everything was not what I wanted, not what I envisioned for her, not what I envisioned for myself or for my older child. And so I just wanted to share that that resonates with me. And resistance might be the issue here. Okay. And so in each and every moment, this is what is happening right now. And there is a tendency, even in myself, like this is something I have actively worked on for a long time, to resist, to fight it. That only decreases your happiness. So I'm going to talk about what does that mean exactly? Like when I say this, what am I referring to? So when there's a situation that we don't want, for instance, a global pandemic, there is often one underlying belief statement that almost always exists, and it causes more stress, less resilience, and reduced happiness and increased burnout. And it usually is something along the lines of, this shouldn't be happening, or I don't want this to be happening. Or it could be on the flip side, like if we're talking about a pandemic, we're probably thinking this shouldn't be happening. But maybe like if you're thinking about your husband, you're thinking about what he should be doing, right? So, which I totally agree with, right? Like with a pandemic, this should not be happening. This should be over by now. And if you want to stay stuck, if you want to stay in burnout, if you want to reduce how much joy you're experiencing day to day, then keep thinking like this. And I don't mean that from like a harsh perspective, because that's how I have to work with myself too. It's like, I have a choice here to shift the way that I'm thinking about it. And no matter how many times I get pissed about the state of the world, it doesn't change this moment. And so what I want to be really clear about, because sometimes people misunderstand where I'm going, this is not resignation. So I'm not saying like, oh, don't resist like anything, just go with the flow. No, you can totally work to create whatever you want in your life. Like from here on out, you can, if there's anything that you can do at your home or with work or in your community, so that whatever's happening right now isn't happening a day from now or a week from now or a year from now, do that. So, but just in this moment, surrender will reduce the burnout. And what I want you to focus on right now is focus on slowing down enough to notice if and how often am I telling myself this shouldn't be happening. That's the very first step. And then in the Brave Accelerator, we go over tools about how to master surrendering in the moment while simultaneously improving your life. Yes, so often. It's very, very common. Nice. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Any questions before I go? Let me do a time check. Are we doing okay? 1:30. Okay. Any questions? How is this landing?
I think that to circle back to the toddler tantrums things, I think sometimes a lot of us have 4-year-old boys, right? Like we tell ourselves like, you shouldn't be acting like this. Something is wrong because you're acting like this. I've done something as a parent that's making you lash out this way. And I was just telling my husband last night, I was a nanny before, and I'm like, my 4-year-old girl did the same thing when she was 4. It's just a normal 4-year-old thing. And we have to not resist the issue, just hold space for it. And then we all can move on past it better, instead of, harnessing that this shouldn't be happening. There's something wrong with what I'm doing, or something wrong with what he's doing, that he's acting like this, but just accepting that it's part of having a 4-year-old is going to make all of our lives a little bit easier.
100%. And I love that you tied this to tantrums. So really quick, I'm not a child psychologist, so I'm going to put that caveat out there. I'm an organizational psychologist. However, I know people, and even, kids are people. So imagine we have, this reservoir of how much stress we can handle in a day, where we have like 0 down here and 10 here. And for humans, our stress increases. We have a lot of things coming at us, a lot to process, a lot to do, a lot of choices to make. And so for your kids, they have to de-stress. And when they're little, the de-stress, when, for instance, like if you hold a boundary, for instance, with your son, you hold a boundary, you're like, I'm going to stick to the boundary, but then he freaks out. That's his way of de-stressing, of letting it out. And I think, like, based on the way you explained it, that, but not everybody does. So I wanted to make that point. So it's actually, well, it kind of should be happening. And that's going to help him. Like if he's at an 8, it's going to help him go to 5 so that he can handle more things coming at him, for instance. And so we all have that. If you've ever felt like I just went from 0 to 60 or 0 to 10 in 60 seconds, probably you were operating at like an 8 or maybe a 9. And so you didn't really go from 0 to 10. You have not allowed yourself to de-stress. So I love that. My husband will be watching this recording tonight. Yes, yes, yes. I love it. Okay. We need a girls' night to de-stress. Yeah, personally, I like to do things. I mean, you guys are all coaches, so I think you're probably doing this regularly, but I like to do things with movement to de-stress. Running, working out. I part of it. So there's a little voice in my head that's like, you're going to sound nuts if you say this out loud, but I'm going to say it. Rage dancing and like punching a pillow, like just getting it out. I also do like angry journaling, all those kinds of things, just to reduce that stress level. Okay, I'm going to move on to the 5th thing that no one told you. And your personality may not be what you think it is. So before I elaborate on this, tell me a few things that you believe are negative aspects of your personality. Controlling. No hesitation. Outspoken. Got a lot of people high in control. Perfectionism. People pleasing, control for sure. Wow. Okay, we need a session on control. Being blunt. Okay, I love all of these. Okay, so perfectionism too. All right. So what a lot of people think is their personality is actually a defense mechanism. So people tend to think that defenses are protecting themselves from someone else. However, defense mechanisms are actually in place to protect yourself from feeling your own negative feelings. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here. With people pleasing, you may be protecting yourself from feeling rejected. For instance, if I say no or don't do what this person wants, they may reject me or not like me. With control, now there's not a right way, like how much control is like a good amount. This is on a continuum and there's no right way to be. The key is to be flexible based on the situation that you're in. Okay, so if you find yourself not being flexible around control, you're like rigidly controlling something, that's an indication that a defense mechanism may be present, and it may be because of a fear of feeling incompetent. Okay, so if I have an unconscious fear of feeling incompetent, I may choose to be high control, because if I see that everything is done the way that I want it done, I won't be humiliated or embarrassed. Or I may choose to go low control. I will let somebody else take control here, make the decisions, make the choices so that I'm not humiliated or embarrassed. So you can see this is really, really deep, and I go much more in depth in this in the Brave Accelerator. But the main thing that I want you to be aware of is if you are having negative things pop up about yourself, for instance, like being a perfectionist, or people pleasing, or maybe falling into deadly silence, or being overly critical, or blaming others, or using humor to diffuse a situation, that is an indication that you may be feeling defensive. And what I want you to work on tapping into, as soon as you notice that about yourself, ask yourself, if I were afraid of something in that moment, what was I afraid of feeling? And then remember back in the very first point that I made, the key is to allow yourself to feel the full emotion. So if you're cutting it off with a defense mechanism, you are keeping yourself stuck. How did that land with you? Are you all like, it's a big topic. So I know I just like blew through it in like 3 seconds, or 3 minutes. I'll pause if you're typing. I can talk all day. How do you sort through that? Do you mean reducing your defensiveness? Or what do you mean by that? If you want to unmute, you can unmute. I don't mind if there's kids screaming in the background or anything.
Yeah, like, so when those negative feelings come up and you figure out, okay, so it's because I'm afraid of people's opinions of me. How do I then break through that? So I've identified it. What do I do now?
Yeah. So you might not like this answer, or maybe you will, but I don't know anything about you, but there's multiple things. One thing that you can do is a vulnerable share, and you choose who you want to share that with. But for instance, during this call, I did this with you. So I said like, oh, I have this little voice in my head that's saying, and then I shared whatever it was, like, oh, they're going to think I'm an idiot. That's vulnerable and really open. And probably you're like, oh yeah, I felt that too. And so openness is the grand simplifier, and everyone has felt the fears that are coming up with you. Like nobody gets out without feeling it. So saying it out loud, it can take the weight off your shoulders, and it can increase the connection between you and others and take the power of the fear away. And so one of the things that comes with the Brave Accelerator as a bonus is what I call brave conversations. And it's like, how do I identify what those fears are and share them? And who do I share them with so that it doesn't control me? Yes. If only my husband could understand. Yeah, my husband is a mechanical engineer, and I share a lot of this with him, but it resonates. Yeah, openness is the grand simplifier, and that's a big topic, but it can be very, very powerful. So how does that land with you? I'm forgetting, was it Caitlin that spoke up?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just scary to think about doing.
It is. It takes a lot of courage. So it takes two things. It takes self-awareness to realize, like, how am I actually feeling? What am I afraid? And then courage to disclose it to others, or even to yourself. Because sometimes once you know, like, okay, I'm afraid of being embarrassed, you can talk kindly to that inner critic And you can say like, hey, like, I might sound crazy right now. We're just going to do this. Okay. So, hey, mine is Bianca. Thank you for bringing that up, Bianca. Like, I really appreciate you trying to protect me and keep me safe. Like, I know that you want us to look as best as we can, and I've got this. Like, we can do this. Because, and I share that dialogue with her for you, because that's another tool, a powerful tool that you can use. Most people, how do they relate to their critics? Shut them down, try to get them to stop talking. Like, why are you saying those things? Like, come on, leave me alone. Like, one of the things was overthinking, right? And so maybe that's like an internal battle with her, like, oh, you look stupid when you said that, or like, what are they going to think of you now? So she's trying to keep you safe. That's all. So when you're kind to her, she'll be kinder to you. Just as if she was a real person. I mean, she's like she's like your 7-year-old self. Boom. I love that comment. Thank you. Question.
It all circles back to like you literally named your self-talk, right? And we always talk about being kind to ourselves and stuff, but if you're shutting down the negative emotion or thought, then you're not having the complete thought, and then she's feeling unheard. So she's just going to be louder and louder. And that's when those lies essentially manifest in your head and you're completely paralyzed. But if you identify that you're having that thought, whether you rage journal, I loved that one too, or you literally speak to her and say, thank you, that's entirely unhelpful, in my David from Schitt's Creek voice.
Yes.
But like, it's just so good. It all just circles back around to getting off of that hamster wheel of shoving down what we're feeling.
Yes, 100%. And some of that, just to tie to another tip I shared, was like, what meaning are you putting on it? You choose the meaning. So if she's talking, if your critic is talking mean to you and you put meaning on, like, see, that's evidence that I screwed up, or that I'm doing something wrong, or that something's wrong with me, you're choosing that meaning. You can pick a new meaning. And all of this, all of it, I promise you, whatever feeling, thoughts that are coming up for you are because you are human. Not because of anything else, just because you are human. So I want to say that because I know a few of you resonated with feeling like broken at times, right? So other questions before I keep going? I'm basically done.
Thank you so much. I think this resonates with so many people, and I know so many people will come find you as they're watching the recording as well.
Let me see. Oh, was it? Thank you. I was like, was there a question down there? Yes, if you want to, let me see. I think I got to advance the slide. Okay, if you want to come hang out with me on Instagram, you can come hang out with me at best.self.mama. And even if some of you are not moms on the phone, the advice that I give is pretty applicable to all humans, men, women, moms, non-moms. I just niched to moms because my heart is connected to moms. So if there are no more questions, I just want to share a couple slides just so you know, if you're interested in my program, and you can ask more information about it. But again, my belief is that self-awareness is your superpower. So the Brave Accelerator is a 10-week course designed to drastically increase your self-awareness so that you can use your emotions as data rather than having them define you. Not let your clients' success or failures define you. Rediscover yourself. Feel more calm and peaceful, ditch, guilt that's coming up, reduce your anxiety, all the things that are related to emotions, because that's what it's all about, is mindset and emotions. And I have the course broken up into small videos, 15 minutes or less, that are easily digestible. So if you're super busy, it can fit into your schedule. And it rolls out every other week for 10 weeks. And I've got monthly Q&A sessions, so you can come to me and ask any questions that are coming up. I could probably go on and on to help you understand more about the program, but I want to be respectful of your time too. I know you have a lot on your plate. So let's see what I'll share. This chart of everything that it comes with. So 5 pre-recorded modules that are packed with life skills that you probably didn't know you were missing. Like maybe some of these things you're like, oh yeah, that's really helpful and I had no idea. And those monthly Q&As, like I said, which you can watch live or replay, it's just as powerful. And then I've got exclusive exercises and self-discovery assessments to help you deepen your self-awareness, identify those defense mechanisms so that you can overcome them, and then a private Facebook community. And you've got lifetime access for everything. So it's only $497, which I feel really excited about because I also share this content at the organizational level. And this is really a steal of the deal. I am not like, it's like I said, life-changing. So I would be very happy to answer any questions that you have about the program, or if you just want to follow and hang out, I'm super happy with that too. And I think Brittany, if you have like a specific link, if you can share with them afterwards to get registered. But if you want to, in the meantime, take a look at like testimonials from other people, this is the website. You can take a look and see outcomes that have been generated for other women. And that's all that I have. And I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes, answer any questions about earlier today, any questions about this, and I'll stop talking.
Does anyone have anything? No? No, I think this is super incredible, and I will share all of the links and stuff that Stephanie sent me before, so you guys can click around and see. You can message her if you have any specific questions you're not comfortable sharing on the recording, obviously. But I think that this, like I mentioned this morning, is invaluable information. Like, I mean, this 3 pages of notes I just took, it's like, okay, I'm going to make my husband watch this. I'm going to send it to my best friend. Like, it's just, you know, tips to be a better human being, right? Like, we all need to make sure that we're creating space for ourselves to process and de-stress and get our, you know, like, I think that as moms specifically, Stephanie and I were talking before you guys hopped on, we try and do it all. So we're like at a 9 or 10 all of the time. And I loved that visual of, you don't go 0 to 100, you're sitting at 87, you know?
Yes.
And so just so good. So thank you again for your time today. And we will be in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you all for being open and asking questions and sharing some of your struggles so that we could, you know, start working through them.
Yes. Thank you, ladies. We'll see you later.